Hey, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are joining us from. My name is Abhijit Bhaduri. I am a leadership and social media coach. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the kind of things that I have faced in my career. My career has been a series of changes. I've worked across different sectors and tried different things. And every time I felt that I wish I had somebody to whom I could ask a bunch of questions because career has so many choices. How do you generate options? What is the right timing? What is the right sector to be in? Is it better to be on your own versus something else? And are we just too obsessed with careers only in the corporate sector, etc., etc., etc.? There are a whole lot of questions, and in order to really talk to us about those kind of dilemmas, I have got with me somebody who has really seen a whole range of options, from fairly close quarters, and has a point of view which I really like and respect. So I have with me Pratik Kumar, who is the CEO of Wipro Infrastructure Engineering, and he's going to be my guest this evening. So without further ado, let's get going with Pratik. Pratik, hi, welcome.
Thank
Welcome
you. Thank
to
you.
Dreamers and Unicorns show, and such a delight to have you here. Where are you joining us from?
So I'm in my office, Abhijit, in Bangalore, and hello to all the viewers and listeners who have also logged in, and good to be here.
All right, because say there's some user who's joined in and said that to decide between something and work from home live and Abhijit live, I'm opting for you. You sound grounded. So we have all kinds of interesting listeners and viewers comments. I'll bring them up, but I wanted to get started with a couple of questions that I had about these are timeless career questions. So I just thought I should ask you for your view. When you look at your career graph, you finished. I know that you did your college undergrad in Delhi University, and then you went to XLRI and did a degree in human resources. So when you did that, did you really sort of think about your career the way it's turned out to be? What aspect of it is what you planned, what you wanted, and what is it that has been different from what you wanted?
So Abhijit, the honest answer is no. We spent those 2 years in Excel, and you've been part of it, so you know it as much. I mean, those very happy 2 years, but if I now begin to share and say that, look, we had scripted it all out, that how it's going to pan out over the next couple of decades, I think it will be rather insincere. And our expectation from career at that point in time was to be able to get associated with a good institute, good organization, which will give expression to whatever talent which you are bringing into the organization. And through the process, you realize all that you aspire from your own professional pursuit. So that was about it, and maybe some distinction on, the classic differentiation those days, whether you want to go into industrial relations or whether you want to remain in human resources. So broadly, I think you had that kind of clarity, but beyond that, I don't think we compartmentalize ourselves saying that, look, and the way those conversations, today I get to listen to when I have those with the youngsters, where they're very clear about the sectors they want to go to. They're very clear about the size of the organizations they want to be associated with or not associated with. I do not think those lines were as distinct when we were there.
Or was it because there weren't that many choices to begin with? Or was it that, I mean, I certainly can tell you that, forget the external world, I just didn't have any clarity about what I wanted out of a career. And I always had a very sort of, the feeling was always that I've jumped into the swimming pool and we'll figure out whether it's the deep end or the shallow end, or am I swimming back towards the steps? So
Yeah.
I really didn't ever have that.
So I think the concept of what a career should look like, and I think it was reasonably well defined to the understanding of all the folks who were there in the management schools and even outside. So one didn't flirt around with that concept as much. And to your point, Abhijit, it's also a fact that the kind of range of options which today we get to see is not something which was available then. Really, technology, the way it has played a role in terms of hastening and adding to the velocity to your career moves, that was not something which was there. The format was very, very traditional. And the expectation was and who do we look up to? I mean, we were looking at our own parents' generations, and many of them have built their own career being part of one institution right from start till end. So you get into a good organization, build strong work ethics, build on those value systems, and begin to contribute, begin to learn, and work your way through. And through that rites of passage, hopefully you will do well in life, you will do well in your career, and you will inspire others to do likewise. So I think it was broadly that. So to your point, yes, I think there have been very clearly a couple of shifts which have taken place, since the time when we were in Excel and today. So one, of course, what I actually touched on. So your career is no more a linear graph, right? So it doesn't get measured anymore in terms of the chronological age. So in terms of the number of years you have spent. So it doesn't get seen through that light. And Abhijit, you would be aware of this concept of the protean career, right? It comes from the Greek god Proteus, who could change his form at will. So that from feature of Proteus comes, this adjective protean, where you could actually adapt multiple roles. You can actually build variety, mutable form. You can assume multiple shapes. So career in today's parlance is more about, how you can actually build more variety, how you can actually pack in many of those career shifts and moves. It's more about the experiences which you are being able to build in, and how you're being able to transcend some of those, which makes your own career more rich and fulfilling. Which in our time, this was rather blurred, or it never used to actually get into in the discussion related to careers those days. And second is something which I actually touched on, is that I do believe that technology has played a great enablement role to adding to that velocity to career, both in terms of shifts as well as the variety, which is today available for people to actually go for. So these, I think, were, in my view, are two fundamental shifts. When I reflect on it, Abhijit, there are a couple of psychological shifts have also taken place. I'll be quick here. One, I think there's at a philosophical level, the whole question of who owns the skills today, right? Whether I, as an employee, it's my unique property which I own, right? Or is it the organization? And therefore, the individual is seeking more control on where they would like to deploy this skill, in what manner will they actually deploy this skill. And there's a very nice little subtle tussle which is going on, and which is spawning a new kind of work ethos, where you have to actually blend and bring in people who do not necessarily seek a full-time career in organizations as well. So I think that's at one dimension, which clearly is actually taking its own shape and role. The other, again, from my own observation over a period of time, Abhijit, is that I find there is a very unique equation which has actually also set in as an individual, as an employee, and as an organization. Both are a little careful today to invest emotionally in a relationship. And I think about why would it be? And the only logical answer is that both would like to retain their objectivity to make few of those career calls, where organization may have to make some choices. Individual may like to actually make some of those choices. So they're very careful in investing in a relationship which is a little more emotional. And the term which used to use our time is that whole sense of loyalty, and you deploy that. Today, it almost appears that it's not a workable notion from either from an employer's standpoint or from the employee standpoint. And the attempt is that how you can build an organization which is fair in being able to get the best out of individual and reward fairly. So I think these are a few interesting shifts from from my own perspective over the last few decades, which I have observed. Kind of
So
longish answer.
we have some of our listeners, commenting, and someone says, as long as the organization is an enabler, that's fine because no one owns destiny other than the individual. And of course, Tilotoma says that so nice to see him on video. I once had a call with him way back in 2004. Fantastic discussion. So you've clearly left a strong impression on that, Pratik. Sham has a question specifically, which I thought is interesting. Choice overload seems like a challenge. Many struggle to make that first move. Is this the first career move? The first career move that you make, is it as important as it used to be, or is it that moving later is more possible and more fluid? What would you say? That's a great question, Sham. Thanks, Pratik.
So
So his question
reread the
is the
question.
first career choice, is that something that has a greater impact today or lesser impact today as compared to, because there are more choices. Does it mean there'll be more choices as you go along? So, later moves become more important, or is it the earlier moves?
So I think, it's a very relevant question. I believe that the first choice of your career today is a more considered one based on a fairly thought through set of filters which you have applied to what kind of career you would like to seek. So, I have my conversation in my own extended family, whether nephews and nieces who are now almost at the cusp of joining their own careers, and many of them look at me and said that, look, I would not like to work for organization which is so large and big, and I would rather be in a setup which is rather small. So I'm just giving you an example, but people are a lot more thoughtful about where they actually get started. That's one. Two, I also believe that they're a lot more secure today in experimenting, even if in the first move, and they know there is a chance of going wrong. Someone may like to go and join a startup. At a 21-year-old kid who's just coming out of an engineering school is not expected to ask for, what's your funding source and what does your books look like and show me your P&L. I mean, just instinctively you actually go ahead because, you want to be part of that excitement and you want to actually immerse yourself in it, right? You also know somewhere inside that, look, I mean, it could actually be a wrong move. And tomorrow I could be without, because people and uncles and aunts have said, you know what, that other kid who used to work in a startup and it actually just folded up within 6 months. He says, so what? That experience will still count and I'll go somewhere else. So the point being that it's a lot more considered choice today, right? And our time was that, get out of the placement season, sign off, and then enjoy the rest of what is left of your stint in the institute, right? That used to be the larger motivation and driving force than anything else. Honestly, that is, at least in my case, and I know for many of my friends and colleagues as well.
We have another question where someone asked that as freelancers increase as the proportion of an organizational workforce, are we back to employee engagement issues for freelancers also? Is that something that organizations will need to worry about? That engaging them with the same gusto as they do with regular employees? Is that even a career option? I mean, would the organization view the engagement of a freelancer as a career choice for the freelancer, or is it another way to make money for the short term? What do you think?
So let's back up a bit. I think the design of the organization will undergo a shift. And by that, what I mean is the organizations already today, and more so in future, will be the ones which will have to re-architect the roles where your full-time employees, as well as people who are part-time employees, people who are who are just providing the service on a project basis or whatever, they're all part of the larger organization system, right? And that person who's there, who's not your full-time employee, has got a choice either to be able to provide the service to you or to another company down the road as well. And therefore, the equation cannot always be where, as long as I'm actually compensating you well, why should it matter? That is, in my view, is a key driver. But that person needs to feel equally engaged as part of that as well. So therefore, the organizations will have to accommodate some of these blended lives as a part of your own organization design. And therefore, I cannot, in a very conventional way, I cannot actually come in and say that, look, when I look at the hall and say that, look, these are my 15 people who are my full-time employees, and I can call them out. And these are the people who are not there. These are my contract employees, or gig workers, or whatever. So I can ignore, and it could mean anything. It could mean a small celebration you're having. He says, and the mail goes out. Think about it. He says, only my full-time employees are expected. Rest of you can continue working the way you are. And maybe it's a very crude example, just to illustrate the point. You can't do that. I mean, as long as a person is there, the rest of the lines need to blur. It's just the contract which the individual is having with the organization is of a different nature, right? There is one individual is offering all his services to organization based on a certain contract versus another one who's a full-time employee. But outside of that, I don't think rest of it needs to change in any manner.
Yeah, so you have some of the responses, like Prabhakar just says that it brought back memories of how we looked at placements, and the summer internship where you looked at locations like Bangalore were a bigger driver. Sham says that he really likes your answer, and he says even his choice at engineering at 21 was only to escape medicine rather than a conscious choice of what else to do. There is also another question which Sujoy has asked, and I'm going to bring that up. I think it's a great question. He says that when a fresher, somebody who's entering the workforce for the first time, what factors do they really use when they look at making a considered choice about an organization? And I would just add a corollary and say, has that changed over the years? What's driving that change, if there is any? So what would you say?
So some of it I already alluded to in my previous response, Abhijit, where people are a little more careful in making some of those choices, right? Because they have very clear go, no-go criteria, the kind of organization they want to be associated with. I gave you only one dimension about size of the organization, which many of the kids feel very overwhelmed and never try to impress them, saying that you are, 200,000 people, large, gorilla, right? That's not the most inspiring thing to tell a youngster of 21, and for him or her to believe that he's going to be 200,001 employee in the company. So the organizations will become more small and more focused, where the person will need to become a part of that atomized part of the organization, and that becomes the anchor for the person to learn, for the person to contribute and get identified with, right? So that's only one dimension which I spoke about in terms of the size. But we also know that the students and the freshers today are more socially aware. Some of them make their choices based also on the larger purpose of the organization, whether it identifies with some of their own beliefs, what they think it, and it's a great thing. And today they're being able to anchor some of their choices, or anchor some of their these considered choices, because those options are available for people to do it, right? So people, to the question, what are some of the things they look for? I think some of those elements have not changed much. I mean, they seek an opportunity to learn, they seek an opportunity to contribute, they seek an opportunity to get fairly rewarded. They want to see how fast and quickly they can move. But most of it is they want to, the timelines are blurred, right? They want to pack in that short period of about a year, 2 years, which they have set themselves out for in the likely association with any organization. as much as they can. And if they can actually maximize it in that organization, well and good. If they think that they're getting stuck for some reason, then they will move on. So there are multiple things which go into making these choices. How it actually fits into the jigsaw of a 21-year-old impressionable mind to make that call where he or she will join is a little difficult. But what does not go away is that, yes, I mean, the lure of being awarded in a handsome manner for the work which you will be bringing to the organization continues to be a big driver. We can't shy away.
So more of a yes no kind of question. Do you think that today people in the early stages of their career are far more driven by the money than the purpose or the nature of the work? Is that should one say that?
It's never one factor, and if you try and impress someone by only just showing this is the compensation,
Showing the wallet.
Yes, and you have very little else to talk about in terms of the learning opportunity or the work opportunity, or how the person could contribute, or how the person. So it's like it's a nice book, Abhijit, and you being an author, you will know, where you show only one nice juicy chapter, but you leave out the rest, and one doesn't know. I would hesitate to actually read a book where I do not know little more other than that just one chapter you told me, right? So people need to actually know the whole 9 yards before they make the call.
And I think that it's also that when you look at engaging freelancers, like Bismay Mishra actually says, as a freelancer, can the organization stress the whole notion of engagement just as much as they do for employee engagement? And someone before that has answered that freelancer is not a free floater. They are passionate individuals who also want to change and influence. So,
Absolutely.
to which actually Sujoy has an interesting follow-up question: that is it a problem for the gig workers to switch on and off between the organization's culture as they engage with multiple organizations? Because they may or may not be able to make a choice in terms of who do they really, their engagement is much shorter. So is there like a curve that, if you are looking at a longer stint, then you worry about the organizational fit, in a shorter, more transactional engagement, you don't? Is that a valid way to look at it?
Yeah, and I think Sujoy's question is also a little more deep than that. And it also says, as you keep moving from one organization, one exposure to the other, you keep getting exposed to different cultures, different value system. Some of it may not actually sit well with your own value system, and whether you get comfortable or you think that in any case it's just a service which I'm providing, so I'll do it, finish it off, and then move on. And so I think, Abhijit, over a period of time, based on your experience, you get clarity on who you want to work with and who you do not want to work with. And some of it is coming through your own experience. Some of it is anecdotally through your colleagues who may have actually been there and what they have to share. It reminds me almost of the Uber drivers who actually today rate you as a customer, right? I mean, just like we like to rate service providers, they also rate you. And while
Sure.
you could be giving whatever rating, and if your rating is something like about 3 out of 5 consistently over a period of time, they also know whether it's a good customer to actually have or not have, right? So I think that's the larger issue around this whole arena of gig worker, which I think is as a concept is here to stay, right? So organizations have to actually wake up. I can tell you, in my own organization, I've had people who wanted time, who wanted space, but I still value what they bring to the organization. And we have completely structured their contract and the time and the employment in a manner where they are able to balance the both very effectively. And we have done it in a number of cases, and it works as well. It works perfectly. But if you have to actually take it to a certain scale, there are a few other things which need to be addressed, right? And which is in terms of the whole ecosystem around, in terms of rules, regulations, the labor laws, and all. Those are still not addressing many of the things which ought to be there. I mean, like, so for instance, and it may not be applicable to the professionals of a certain kind, but just go a couple of notches lower in terms of some of the benefits and others which are fairly basic need for an individual and his or her family, right? Where does that actually come? And you may be aware, I mean, there are today cases being fought in the US where a lot of gig workers are contesting. For many of these privileges and benefits, they should be treated no different from employees. So I think it's an evolving space. One should keep an eye, but I have absolutely no doubt that it's an organization will see different shades of people as part of it, and organizations should have the wisdom to be able to bring all of them and get best out of them.
So there is. So you have someone who says that's a great example. The Uber driver rating the passenger, and both have a choice. It's a two-way process. I think I'd sort of build on this comment and say that there is an opportunity to create a platform where gig workers also rate the people who they are working with. In terms of how well they are treated, are they paid on time, are they treated with a certain degree of dignity, courtesy, basic facilities being extended to them, etc. So I think we will see that kind of a model coming up, and you do have versions of this in some of the platforms. Some of them do,
Yeah.
but it's not as prominently there. I think when in a hierarchical society, it still remains the employer's rating of the individual. But in the informal world outside, there are enough people, there are enough places, whether it's Glassdoor or some such thing. Many people also do rate. So that's a response. And uh, some of the other people have also asked a couple of questions that, where I kind of think that this whole notion of when you are switching, and this I'm drawing on Prabhakar's question that he's asking that when you people switch in shorter intervals, does it take away from building what are usually called crucible experiences that you sort of really shapes you? And is it true that today organizations look for people with a greater variety of experiences? Because here you are, you've pretty much, spent most of your career, I would say 95% of your career in one organization. So in that sense, you can't even say that, it's that you've looked at 15 different sectors. You've changed within the group. How do you reconcile all of these little factors?
Yeah. No, so one needs to be clear what one is seeking out in that engagement. So um, if I want to be a person very comfort in my skin, being a gig worker and being able to continue, because there are a lot of other positives of it which otherwise may not be available. I mean, you have the flexibility of who you work for. In a manner of speaking, you can actually set your own time and pace, how much time you want to actually commit to that work and all that. The crucible of experience which Prabhakar was speaking about, it's true, because uh, the whole concept of being able to mold a new entrant in the organization and be able to take them through that rites of passage and teach them the navigational skills in the beginning, then help them to actually move on, where they are able to influence the outcomes in the organization, and eventually they're able to influence the direction of the organization when they assume more strategic role in the organization, right? I think some of those may not be relevant here, because you're not trying to actually through the gig employment, and you're not trying to have these people become institution builders, right? And that for you would be a separate set of people. But the question is, do they contribute to the culture of the place? In a very subtle manner, yes, they do also. Anyone who is, what shapes the culture of the organization, Abhijit? I mean, it's culture of the organization gets shaped by every little interaction, every little experience, which all come together to be able to, on a sustained regular basis, people, something which feel it, right? And it doesn't matter what's the nature of your engagement with the organization, you are in some manner contributing. So you are contributing to the culture of the the setup you're associated with, whether you like it or not, right? So, but however, you're not being groomed for certain roles because that's not the choice you have expressed yourself for, right?
Nice.
And therefore, that doesn't become the focus of the organization either, right? But for that role for which you're offering your services, does it mean that am I going to be denied in terms of training inputs? No. I mean, I think the organization should be benefiting if the right kind of training inputs are given to you, which will make you even more productive for what I am ready to compensate you for. But if the thought is that whether I need to actually take him or her through a leadership coaching to be able to manage large team of people to assume higher responsibility, that would be firing in a little different direction, and it may not completely miss the mark.
Uh, I so just a quick yes no on this one. Do you think then people who are looking to run organizations that I like to sort of run a team of 50 people, 200 people, those people are better off staying inside organizations as compared to people who are comfortable working in smaller teams, becoming freelancers? Is that a generalization, or you think it's not a valid observation?
I, 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 so I do not think today people are putting this or spelling out the need to handle 100 people, 200 people, 300 people under my gaze as the most motivating reason for me to become a manager. I mean, it's an happenstance that because organizations are growing large, the project sizes are becoming larger, and therefore my team sizes are growing. But that's not the most driving force for me to be there. And even this would be my recommendation because I cannot put myself in the shoes of that individual. I mean, today you are making a choice, right? And very comfortable in your skin, being a solo leader, right? A solo service provider. But that should not come in the way of you sharpening some of your other skills tomorrow. If because of your skill and the nature, if you're said that, look, you're very good in being able to program manage. So what you were doing, why don't you actually manage that? You cannot then reflect and say that, look, that's not something which I actually expose myself to, and I feel constrained, I feel a little hesitant. So I think that's something which has to be there as part of your repertoire, and because the opportunity to come in various shapes and sizes, and why do you like to miss out on that simply because you denied yourself that exposure?
A related question which I want to bring up now. Pavani has been very patient. She's asked this question a while back. That today we have a number of technologies seeping into the operational roles, and do you believe that should individuals be multifaceted or look for linear growth in one particular skill set? The context of this, I want to just sort of broaden it and say that when people are looking for their career path, typically some of the exercises ask people to draw it out. They draw it like a set of steps or a ladder. Is it a smarter idea today to, by yourself, visualize your career like a web? You're going through a series of experiences, and that may happen at a more senior level, or with a broader scope in other organizations, to really focus on the experience rather than the place where you're working or the duration, because there are times people switch from full-time employment to part-time. So there are multiple ways in which those careers are getting shaped. What would be your take on that?
No, so I would agree with what you said. Eventually, I think it's career is a series of experiences, and more you're able to pack in as a part of your repertoire, it's more fulfilling, it's more rewarding as well. And Abhijit, we must understand, if Pavni's question also was that, you see, we have to acknowledge that roles are likely to get more broad, more expansive, and multi-directional, right? And therefore, if I can make a choice saying that, look, I want to just remain in one area and I can just go deeper in it, that's a call, and you could very well do, you can do very well. But increasingly, as you grow, you got to actually be able to build a certain perspective, your ability to be able to connect those dots. And I've often heard this term called, the pie-shaped, career, where you
Yeah.
actually build your depth in, one or two deep areas, but you should have the ability to be able to connect dots across multiple dimensions, which is what allows you to build insights, which is what allows you to be able to pull in from all the external available sources of information. And that's how it's going to be, because you will never be in a position where you will be master of the trade in everything. And your need and ability to collaborate with others, to learn from others, to be able to know the source of where I can actually get a certain input which will help me in my own tasks, that becomes crucial. So I think while I've not reflected enough on the whole concept of partnership leadership, but instinctively to me it makes sense, because that's what at least I try to do.
What alphabet would you use to describe your own career? Would you use the pie-shaped thing?
Yeah, why go beyond? I mean, it seems to be more like it. I mean, so I'll share with you what has always interested me is to look beyond what was always told to me as my own set of goals and objectives. So I never ever in my own career tried ring fencing myself around that. And I've always tried looking beyond. And I think the opportunity when I stepped into the HR leadership role for the corporation, that gave me the canvas to really fly sideways and be able to experience the full potential of the whole corporation, across multiple sectors, across multiple industries, across multiple challenges, geographies. And there was something which was very unique to be able to learn from each of these, which I think has significantly shaped me in this pursuit, where I built set of skills which is helping me and hopefully helping the organization. But by the same token, being able to just be able to look at the wider set of elements out there and be able to draw meaning, because that's what your team members are looking at you. What do your team members are expecting from you? To be able to understand and bring insight to them, right, from the market trends, and you be able to draw the essence of it and be able to tell them, look, these are likely pitfalls, and this is where I'm going. And for that, you require that breadth.
You have a very interesting, you talked about your career in HR. When you're doing that, you were working with Azim Premji. And what was he like as a boss? And, because you've had him in two stints. Let me just sort of, for the benefit of the listeners, you had him as a boss, if I'm not mistaken, when you're, I can see you smiling at that question, which comes from the left field. You had him as a boss in HR. You again had him as your boss in a business role. Was he different when he was your manager in each of these, or would you say that he remains the same and he asks the same kind of questions? Or what was it like to work with him?
So first, Abhijit is still my boss. Okay. So whatever I say
So you have to
here,
be nice to him.
no. So I do not want to be misunderstood by listeners here that I'm indulging in any kind of flattery, which is not what he would like. This is not something which I would like to do. And the other problem is that so much has already been written about him. I'm not sure what new I can perhaps add, but let me give it a shot, right? So it's a fact, across both stints, both in human resources role as well as in my business role, I've had the rare opportunity to work with him closely. And when you work with anyone, closely, not only him but anyone else, you get an opportunity to observe that individual. And few things, according to me, always stood out when I think of Mr. Premji as a leader, is that he will never expect, Abhijit, for you to do something which he will himself not do first. right? And it gets expressed in multiple ways. And I can give you examples here. Even simple thing like, you're aware we have Wipro leadership qualities, which is a 360-degree process. And it's a massive exercise, and the whole organization has to actually do it. Without fail, he will always be the first one to actually complete it for his own direct reports. He'll finish it, he'll send it out, and as soon as he is done with it, he'll start chasing all of us, whether we have done it or not, right? So I'm just giving you a simple example to illustrate. I mean, he will never demand anything from you which he himself will not be subjecting himself to. I think it's a rare quality in any leader, and it's something which he does it very consistently. And the second is something which has got spoken about, but worthwhile reiterating, that he has enormous appetite for sustained hard work. That's something which is something which he's able to do, and something I have seen him being able to do for years together. And as a part of that routine is that he gets into details. He's very data oriented. But the interesting thing, Abhijit, is that even though he is data oriented, but he relies on his instinct when making a judgment. And that, I think, is an interesting learning, right? While all the data of the world is telling you something, your years of experience is what actually shapes your instinct. And it's always a call when you're wondering what to actually listen to. And very often in many of the situations I've seen where he's very comfortable in being able to make that call, which could be a little contrarian as well. And the last, I would say, is that he bets on people. And and I think all of us have been beneficiary. I have been beneficiary of it. I mean, I was not groomed or had experience in a business role. He betted on that, and hopefully I've not disappointed him in the organization, right? So your question was a little different, was that, between HR role and the business role, did he come across as a different manager or a leader? Frankly, no. I mean, the rigor of his interaction and engagement would be pretty much similar. That I don't think it undergoes a change. But maybe when you're I think he has a very good sense of the pulse of the organization. And I always maintain that he has innate ability to know the elasticity of the organization to absorb a change, right? Which is what good HR leaders are supposed to be doing, right? I mean, you have to have that sense of the pulse of the organization, which he does it. And he does it because he's out there, he's meeting people, he's meeting across hierarchy, and he is able to pull in all that very effectively. He does copious amount of work in terms of understanding people, right? And he will spend enormous amount of time being able to take inputs from all across to be able to form his own judgment on people, which again is a crucial learning and lesson, which in my interactions around people and personalities when I was in HR, I mean, that used to surface very often. And the last bit I would think on the HR front, Abhijit, is that we very often get caught in this dilemma between how do we position ourselves as an organization, right? Whether we are a nice, all-embracing organization where everyone feels very comforted, versus a hard-nosed organization, very, very performance-driven. I need to see what you're bringing to the table at the end of the day, and if not, then bear the consequences, right? And organizations get trapped in this dilemma, according to me. And his attempt always has been to be a fair organization. Don't get pulled in either of the directions. So that, I think, was some of my own observations. As far as business role is concerned, I think it is a lot of time goes in being able to understand the market and connecting effort to connect those dots. But only one element I'll say, and then with that I'll stop, is that most of our discussions is from a long-term point of view, what makes sense for the organization. And therefore bet from a long-term point of view and remain persistent in your pursuit once you have. So you don't dribble around every other day and keep asking whether it's working or not working. I mean, once you have, and we have one or two businesses in our fold which have struggled a little longer than what we anticipated, right? But it requires patience, it requires persistence, and requires a belief that in a longer term point of view, which we are doing is right. So I would really, hopefully, it's what you were wanting to me to touch on, and yeah, I mean, one can go on and on, but I think I should stop.
Yeah, we have Professor TV Rao actually who makes an interesting comment that today people are becoming more complex in their aspirations, and therefore we need more complex HR systems that use technology. What is your view on that?
Um, uh, so I'm not sure I completely agree that we require complex HR systems. We need HR systems which can address those complexities, right? And we maybe just be compounding an issue, dealing with complex set of issues, which is again complicated by another complex set of HR systems, which can just confound the organization. And what Professor Raw is saying is absolutely right, because technology may not be a panacea to all that we actually desire to solve all those issues. But technology can simplify the organization and the systems in a significant way, right? And if we do that realization early, we are able to actually set a few of those principles right in the beginning. It becomes easier. Much later, it's like steering one big, gigantic ship, which takes much, much longer. It's more cumbersome, and a lot of time, effort, money gets wasted. So, and we can actually discuss this more time permitting, but did I see there was a follow-up comment from Professor Raw
No,
as
he's
well?
just sort of summarized the conversation that you had about your comments about Premji. He says that personal examples sustain hard work, data oriented, and taking bets on people and being intuitive is what describes Premji as a manager or as a boss. So he's, I
Yeah,
think, summarized all the thing. Great summary,
thank
by the way, Ben. And I think one piece to sort of look at is this morning I was chatting with somebody who heads compensation and benefits, and he was talking about the challenge of doing this entire thing because people, you're paying the person house rent allowance for, let's say, Mumbai. I'm just taking an example, and the person decides to then operate out of Nainital, where there's a lower cost of living, or any other city for that matter. So, if you reduce that, money, people get offended and they sort of want to have that extra cushion. But then it's unfair to somebody who's sort of working, who's hired from a smaller town, who's sort of getting a lower option. People want to, they are saying that, because of, for whatever personal reason they're having to manage, they want to reduce their time, so I don't want to work full time, I want to work, 4 hours. Then a month later, the person say, I want to work 6 hours. So, what do you do with this? There's the unpredictability. You want to be seen as somebody empathetic. And then, the last point that this person said was, there are some organizations who may have not done anything else great for the employees, but they've introduced one of those gimmicky things that, we'll offer you this. And we've seen many examples of that. I mean, that's also my personal belief. They make these kind of grand announcements on social media, and a whole bunch of employees kind of say, look at that guy. I mean, they are doing something so amazing. Uh, you're not doing anything innovative, so why are we like this? What do you think HR should be doing? I mean, how should you run HR in a world like this where employee expectations are changing, the world outside is changing, people are aware of many more options, they are happy to leave? Where does HR operate in a time like this?
So there are multiple strands to your question, Abhi, but let me try and pick the last one first. Uh, you you don't tinker around with the basic character of the organization because of short-term gains. Because anything which you are not able to sustain it over a period of time, you would appear to be a very ephemeral, seasonal kind of an organization who will keep shifting who you are depending on how the environment is and depending on other things which are changing in your surround, so to speak. And therefore, there has to be a certain consistency of character to an organization. How you come across in your engagement with employee, how you actually reward, how you compensate, how you incentivize, and you cannot be one where because today the going is good, you have those the fancy celebrations and it's hoopla and party time, and tomorrow you find that the newspapers from the front desk is all whisked away, and even the the person at the reception disappeared. So you don't want to be that. So you always mold, and which is what we do in our own personal lifestyle, right? We mold ourselves and bring ourselves to a lifestyle which we will be able to maintain, sustain, right? And we do not actually go on a binge as if things are all I have to actually do, manage, save, spend is for the next 30 days or so. We don't do that. So likewise, even from an organization, you need to actually approach in a similar manner. So that's one. The other is, of course, it's going to get more complex. There will be the multiple dimensions to how compensation gets structured, how much flexibility is going to be there or not. And I think HR, at least from my point of view, I'm seeing that they are, at least in the better organization, they are standing up to be able to do that challenge. There are deeper issues to the whole compensation philosophy as well. And, I can go in a completely different direction there, which I do not think gets adequately addressed in organization, where I talked about the long-term orientation which needs to be there when, in reference to our discussion with regard to Mr. Premji, and when it comes to business. Now that's not unique to Wipro. It happens in all organizations. But you talk about long-term, all your reward mechanisms are only rewarding short-term behavior, right? And professionals are supposed to, HR professionals, compensation experts, are supposed to address this kind of dichotomy which is there, where you provide lip service to long-term behavior, you only incentivize and you compensate and reward short-term outcomes and short-term behavior, and then you expect, why is the strategy not panning out over a period of time? So yeah, I mean, this is a discussion subject by itself, Abhijit. The whole space of compensation philosophy and how it is going to undergo a change. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who are applying their mind, but this could become a weak link for organization in the desire to keep pace with the change which is taking place.
So some people have given us some rapid fire questions, which I'm going to just read them out for you. There are 4 or 5 of them. One of which somebody has asked me that is fluency in English language a big decider of career success, and if so, how does one improve?
Yeah. So I think you being good in communication certainly plays a big role. And I don't think we can emphasize enough, if anyone is trying to tell you that, look, this is more an urban phenomenon and, is an elite school point of view, I would sincerely advise you that, don't fall into that trap. Communication, your ability to influence, your ability to reason out, communication, both written as well as verbal, that plays a big role. And I'll just take a minute, Abhijit, and I would like to just share, and I always share it with even my own children, is that forget about all the skills. If there are a few things which you do, you will be a lifelong learner, right? So, you listen attentively, right?
Mm-hmm.
You read critically, you question constructively, and you write regularly. If these are four things which you are doing,
Say that
right?
again. You listen attentively.
You listen attentively, you read critically,
Read
you ask a question constructively,
constructively.
and the last one was around your writing, that is, write regularly, right? So if you're doing these four things, you will be on a path of lifelong learning, right? It will never ever go away. And that's something which I would advise everyone out there, right? If you can actually fold that in your own learning style, that could be big. And whether it's today is a language skill or it could be tomorrow any other skill, there are ways to be able to do it. But since the question was on English language, I kind of expanded on it. Sorry, it was not a
No,
rapid
I mean,
answer.
I thought it was valuable, and so I think this was quite useful. Personally, for me, this was a big one. I'm going to write it down and I'll share it on Twitter so people also get that. What are some of the tools that you would recommend to stay relevant? What would be your advice?
Uh, so again, I mean, just building on what I responded in my previous response. So over a period of time, and because of my commute and travel, I listen a lot more than reading. Where reading from the book or articles, and therefore I have switched over to audio, that is on podcasts. So depending on, and there's an ocean out there, you could get drowned, right? So you got to be actually clear that you get to the right source, and once you get hold of the source, you stick to it. So for instance, for my own tech updates, what's happening in the technology space, I listen to a few podcasts which I find very illuminating. I mean, some which are more racy. It's Pivot, which you may have heard.
Yeah.
Jeet. I listen to Decoder, which is a little more in-depth take on any technology. It could be on chip shortage, or it could be on electric vehicle, or it could be on IT. I listen to Wall Street Journal Technology Brief, which I find it extremely useful. And all that you can actually do by not spending too much of time. About half an hour, 40 minutes a day is good enough for you to give you and make you very, very current on what's happening around.
And what are you reading now? I mean, you also talked about reading. What are your interests? What are you reading now?
So my reading is very varied. So I don't want to actually hold it out as recommendation, but I can certainly share, what I've been in the last couple of months, what books I've been reading. So it's very varied. I mean, right from fiction to autobiography to non-fiction to, I kind of traverse through. So, so currently I'm reading a very interesting book, which is called Beyond a Boundary, which is by a gentleman called CLR James. So it's about cricket, incidentally, and it's set in Caribbean. But it's not only about cricket; it's also about the whole diaspora of the colonialism which prevailed during that era, right? And through the lens of James, it talks about. So it's a beautiful book. I personally think it's one of the best book on sports written, Beyond a Boundary. I also read something which is more topical, which is it's called Twilight of Democracy, which is by a lady called Anne Applebaum, right? And very briefly, it talks more about the extent of polarization which today exists, where friends who were there together have got completely separated based on today's political beliefs, and they're not being able to see eye to eye. And she's able to build on it from her own experience. She's seen that strife in Poland, and today what she's seeing in the US. And the last one is a fiction. I'm getting the name. It's by Mario Losso. He's a Peruvian writer. It's The Feast of Goat. So it's very interesting. It's in the Dominican Republic, and this guy is an authoritarian leader. And again, it's very interesting. So books, what you do is it allows you to imagine, especially if you've not been to a place, and it's beautifully sketched out. So yeah, so there's fair amount of variety in what I've been reading. No leadership books. I've not been, I would say, driven in that direction. But yeah, this keeps me busy.
Pratik, we are at the end of the hour, and it's been a fabulous 60 minutes. Thank you so very much. And if people have questions and comments, they are going to sort of put that in the comments, either on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook, wherever you are watching this on, or on YouTube. And I'll try and sort of get Pratik's point of view on that. We'll do that. But on behalf of the listeners, thank you so very much for joining us and sharing your ideas. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and especially I'm going to look up some of those books that you've mentioned. Thanks a lot for being here. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very
It
much.
was my pleasure, and I enjoyed the dialogue as much. Thank you.
Thank you.